Clap. Cool. So I recently finished up a really cool project for a product that my company launched this week. And I did a bunch of these awesome product photos of this spiced rum kit. And a couple of the images are composite images that have products floating all in the same scene. And I'm going to show you that today, here, now. I, as someone who has done countless product images over the years, there's a few little things that you can do to make a composite like this very, very, very easy on yourself. A lot of it is just making sure that you've got your lighting consistent, your focus consistent, and that nothing changes too much between shots. So looking right here, we've got our base image. And essentially, if you look down here, what we've got is we've got multiple shots from the same scene under the same lighting conditions of the various items that I'm dropping into the scene. Now, basically what I did was I had the rum bottle hanging from fishing line right here. And this is the position that I wanted it in, but I also wanted the real shadows. I didn't want to do fake shadows under this. So the approach that I took was I wanted to hang it. I wanted it to really be in that space, but I didn't want a ton of wire. So I basically hung it and just kind of let it spin a little bit. And I waited till it got in the right position and I shot that image right here. Now, the other thing that I wanted is I did want at least a little bit of like the correct reflections in the shot. So if you actually look in here, you can see the reflection of the metal funnel in the bottle. So there's at least a little bit of that in the shot. So it kind of like brings it down, makes it feel a little bit more real. And essentially from here, this is my starting image. Essentially what I did was each item within its next shot, I suspended and hung from fishing line using either some white tack or tying it around the object. For this one, I wanted the tin to actually be in contact with the ground because I wanted I wanted to ground a lot of these options. So I'm holding all of the other objects by hand in the scene. The bottle is hanging from a boom arm, so I just left it in the scene just so I could have some placement with where I was putting things. So I kind of knew, all right, this is going to be a little bit in front of it. This is going to be a little bit behind it. Even though I'm not using this bottle from the shot, I'm literally just going to use this part of the tin from this whole image because I'm placing them all within the same scene. My tripod is locked off. Nothing's being touched there. I'm using a remote shutter to get all of the shots done. So I'm not touching the camera at all. That way my scene doesn't change. The first thing I'm going to do in this actual scene is I'm going to build out my background. Now, first things first, I don't need all of this scene. So I'm going to go ahead and do a big crop. I'm going to start with like a 4x5 crop. I'm just going to kind of center everything here. I might even bring it down a little bit. Now, because I'm cropping this and all of the layers are already on top of each other, I don't really need to do too much from here. I'm just going to drop that on. So now back into this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just clean up my background. There's a couple ways you can do this. For the most part, I'm going to first use my patch tool to clean some stuff up. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to duplicate my background first. And I'm just going to make sure that I don't ever touch my background because I kind of like a starting point that I never mess with. So starting from here, I'm just going to use my patch tool to clean up a few bits. This is what's nice about the patch tool is you can kind of take large areas and clean them up much easier. You can do the same thing with, even the fishing line here. Let's see. And grab a whole section of that. Just kind of bring that over. The patch tool kind of works like a healing brush. You just select an area and then you can drag to replace that area. It's going to basically copy the pixels but blend the tones. I'll worry about getting some more refined retouching down here in just a minute. I'm kind of just building up the whole scene, if you will. Now you're going to get a little bit of this in here. That's okay. I wouldn't worry too much about this. What's nice about this section of the background is because it's mostly out of focus, you can just kind of grab from a couple of areas, and if you want to do a couple of passes of patching an area, that can help. If you're not getting the result you want, do it again. You can kind of play with it to build out your scene a little bit. Let's see, I ran into that. It's a little bit too much. So let's come back here. I'm gonna grab you. Now, mostly whenever I am patching an area like this, I pull. I'm not gonna come all the way down here. I'm gonna pull from an area nearby it. And there we go. So that's a little bit closer. I'm gonna come in here. Make sure I'm not touching those too much. There we go. And that's a good start for the top. Let's grab this. Maybe I will come over here and grab a little bit lighter. Let's see. There you go. That's all right for now. I'm gonna bring this crop in just a little bit more, so I don't have to do as much at the bottom either. Here we go. All right, that's a pretty good position right here. So now, one thing I like to do with the bottom, if I'm gonna do this, I don't necessarily wanna clone. I almost just wanna stretch it out just a little bit. So I'm even just gonna grab my rectangular marquee tool. I'm gonna grab that. I always like to do it this way. I like to layer via copy. First, transform it, just kind of stretch it out just a little bit, or you can even stretch a little bit and drag. And then what you can do from there is using a mask, just kind of soften that edge a little bit. And now you have essentially extended that out, and then you merge that section back down onto the next layer. So you've kind of stretched that out. You can't really notice the stretching of that once you have done that. All right, so now I'm going to start introducing all of the elements into the scene. And so because the background never changed between shots, even a rough mask is going to get you a pretty good result. And then you can refine a little bit if you have some issues there. But for the most part, because the scene didn't change, the lighting didn't change, all you got to do is do a rough mask in. Now, here's a fun way that I actually like to do this. Is I like to add a white layer mask first. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to paint out the object until just the object is all gone. And then all I'm going to do is hit Command-I to invert my mask. So that way I know I'm pretty much just very quickly painting the mask over the object that I want. I'll do it again with the next layer here. So I'm just going to add a layer mask. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to paint out the object. Make sure that I'm getting everything that's a part of it that I want to have. And then just going to Command-I. Now, if you see here, I started to get a little bit of extra shadow. So now I can go back with my brush and kind of take out any of the other stuff that I didn't necessarily want to be in that scene. So if you look at my layer mask in here, I can come in and I can kind of clean up some edges. And I'm using a big soft brush because that scene and that background never changed. You almost can't see it. You can't see where those edges are. Now, with this next one, we're going to be a little bit more refined with it because the tin is actually going to end up behind the bottle. We're going to have to go back and we're going to have to clean out that edge. But I'll show you another nifty way of doing that. So same thing here. I'm going to grab a layer mask. I'm going to paint out the bottle. Now, as you see, because I'm painting it out, I'm revealing some of the bottle underneath. You can see where I'm going to have to change that out, but let's invert that mask now. And as you can see here, this is now, it looks like it's in front of it, but I want it to be behind it. So because I was actually holding it back behind it in the scene. That's how the focus lies. I want to make sure that it sits behind this bottle. So one thing I can do, I'm going to turn this layer off real quick. I'm going to come back down here to my original layer that has this bottle in it. I'm going to grab the quick select tool. I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to make a rough selection of this area. The quick select tool has gotten really good over the years. And so like I used to use the pen tool a lot more, but the quick select does such a good job now. One thing I like to do with my selections though, is I like to go into select, modify, and first I like to smooth. Now, depending upon what your resolution for your camera is, now I'm using the Canon 5DS. This is a 50 megapixel. So there's a lot of pixel distance in here. So a 4 pixel smooth might be enough for you. Sometimes you might need a 10 if you're shooting with a higher resolution. Maybe 2 pixel smooth would be enough if you're shooting with something like an 18 or 20 megapixel. It's going to depend on, a lot of different factors. But for me right now, I'm going to smooth it out by 4 pixels. I'm just going to include this bottle in that. Now, while that selection is there, I'm going to go back and turn on this layer. And then I'm going to go right back in. And within that selection, I'm going to brush out that area. So because I've made a selection around the bottle, I'm using that selection now to be the guide for my mask on this layer. It's just Command D there. Tidy that up. If you want to look at your mask, you can do it with quick mask, or if you option click. So now we can see we've got a nice, relatively smooth, refined edge around that. And here we go. Now I'm just going to come in real quick and do a little bit of extra cleanup here, get some of that white tack out of it. And now what's nice, again, because we did it all in the same scene, because we did it all with the same background under the same lighting, again, my mask is still relatively rough around that object, but it's almost indiscernible to the scene. Now I can come in here, I will go in and clean that up a little bit more, just because I do like to have at least some kind of, I don't like to have a bunch of crazy lines running around. I'll come in, we'll just clean out that edge, and I'll worry about cleaning out the white tack that's on that a little bit later. All right, so we've got 2 objects in here. Excuse me. So we've got a few objects in here now. I'm actually going to come back to this one, refine this mask a little bit more. Let's bring that down. Just going to go ahead and clean that up. This is what's nice about using layer masks, is you can always kind of go back and redo or undo your various things that you need to do. Let's continue on. We'll try and go through these pretty quick. I want my lemon in there. Let's see here. Let's add that layer mask. Let's paint it out. Now, here's one thing you will notice. See how my tone around this is changing a little bit. So that's because I either blocked a light with my body when I was stepping over. If we hide that layer mask, we kind of turn this off and on, you can't see a ton of difference, but I think that's probably what it was, is when I reached in to kind of hold that in, a little bit of my body blocked the light. So that part of the background is actually a little bit darker around that scene. When we go to invert that mask, we're actually going to see a little bit of that around it. But this is then where I'll come in and I'll refine my mask a little bit more. Or alternately, one thing you can do, let's say you want to make sure that that's matching. You can come in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a curves adjustment. If you hold Option and click this little space, then what that does is that makes it makes that curves adjustment apply to only the layer that it's pointing down towards. So you're not doing it to the whole scene, you're just doing it to that layer. And so now what I can do is I can actually just darken that. So now I'm doing this adjustment to that whole scene. Now I can just darken it just a little bit. Now, if I wanted to, I could even just merge that down. Now I've made that adjustment directly to that. And then when I change my scene, now I don't have to go through and refine that mask anymore. But I will, to get rid of a little bit of that. And then I'll come in a little bit later and clean that up. Yeah, I'm doing this a little bit quicker on here. There we go. Rough, quick, dirty. And now let's do the last one. Let's do the last lemon wedge over here. Let's do the same thing. Let's paint it out of the scene. Actually, we didn't want to do that. Let's hit Command I to invert our mask. And there we go. So now, what is also nice about this, if we wanted to, we could refine the masks around our objects a little bit and kind of move them around. Like for instance, the way I've cropped this, actually, that cinnamon stick could be a little bit closer. So if I move that over, you're actually going to see what that mask has kind of looked like around it. So if we wanted to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refine the mask around that. I'm going to kind of use the same thing that I did before with the quick select tool. First, I'm going to actually just turn that layer mask off real quick. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use this to select that. I'm going to let it refine it. And let's see here, I actually want to make sure that it's not getting that. So I'm going to use this little subtract here, and I'm going to paint along that. Let it do its thing. Refine that a little bit. Refine that. And then what I'm going to do again is with my selection, I'm going to modify smooth by a few pixels. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to select modify feather. I'm going to feather it by 1 pixel because as you can see that cinnamon stick is a little out of focus. So the edges of it are a little bit soft. So I want to leave some of that softness to that edge. There's that. So now if I go back to my layer mask, if I went in here right now and I painted, because I've made that selection, I want to paint on the other side of that selection. So if you ever need to invert that, if you hit Command Shift I, that inverts your selection. So now basically my selection is the whole image except for the cinnamon stick. So then I can come in and looking at my quick mask, if I hit the backslash button, I can come in and refine that mask a lot tighter. So now what we have is a much more refined cinnamon stick, and I can even just drag that just about anywhere on the scene, but I'm going to keep it over here just within the boundaries of that area. So now let's turn this back on. I've got a couple more little things here. We'll just do these real quick. I'll speed this part up. Okay, so now I've got those done. What I'm gonna do next is I'm essentially gonna merge them all into almost like a finished layer. But I'm not going to lose anything that I've previously done so far. So I haven't really done any retouching. This is all just masking. Everything is in its place now. So what I'm actually going to do first is I'm going to grab all of these layers and I'm going to drop them into a group. I'm just going to label this. I just named that elements to put that in there. Now everything is pretty much where I want it to be. Now I'm going to continue on my retouch, but I don't want to lose this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Command, Option, Shift, and I'm going to hit E. What that does is that takes everything, every layer that you have, and it merges it all down, but adds it as a new layer on top. So now I essentially have a new base layer to work with. So I'm going to start here with, I'm going to duplicate that so I can build up from there. And then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to do my typical retouching of the rest of the image. And we'll see how quickly we can do a bit of that. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to clean up this. Clean up this fishing line. So I'm going to use a mix of tools here. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. I'm going to use stuff like the patch tool again. I am also going to use things like the healing brush. So with the healing brush, let's do this again. There's some instances where I wouldn't use the healing brush. This is okay here, because then I can come in and just kind of clean up a little bit of this fishing line around here. And the healing brush itself has actually gotten really good. It used to not be able to get anywhere near edges, but now if you use it right, you can use it over edges and it does a killer job. You know, they've got the algorithms figured out for that really well. I'm going to come in here a little bit tighter, grab my clone stamp, and just kind of clean up around that edge. Now, this is looking kind of messy, so one thing you can do, I'm going to actually grab this side of the bottle over here a little bit. Going to layer that via copy, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this over, going to flip horizontal, rotate that, and then just kind of like line it up in the rough area of where that would be. That looks about right. Let's turn that off and on. So it's flaring that edge out a little bit, but you know what? That's okay. It doesn't bother me. Looks right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to merge that down. And now I'm just going to, you know, go through and clean up any of the signs that was done. Grab this, clean up some edge of our little wooden cap here. You can grab some of this. One of the things I also like to do, if I take a part from another area and move it to another part, so where I've got two of the same scenes essentially, what I like to do is I like to go through and then kind of retouch that area to modify it a little bit more to where it doesn't look exactly like the other piece. Like I'll modify how some of the reflections look, or I'll change the shape of a line in it just a little bit, to where it doesn't look like it's exactly the same as the other side. So now we've got a really, you know, clear edge over here where we had a lot of that fishing line before. Made that a little bit of an easier cleanup. So I'll just go through and clean up bits of the bottle here. You know, for the most part, I'll just use something like the healing brush in here. I'll speed this part up a little bit. Okay, lastly, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick pass of dodge and burn, which I showed in a previous video. So real quick, we'll just do a quick curves adjustment to brighten everything up. I'm going to change my blend mode to luminosity. I'm going to fill that layer mask black, and then actually you can also just duplicate that and then change your curve down to dark. So now you have a dodge and burn layer. Basically, I'm just going to use a brush, a very soft edge brush at like a 5% opacity for now. I'm just going to lightly, instead of 5%, lightly paint in to brighten up some areas. I'm going to brighten up that label a little bit, brighten up that label, hit a couple of these objects with it. Come in here, brighten up that bottle cap a little bit. Let's see, let's take a look at what that does. That adds a bit. Let's come into the curves. Now we can darken like shadow areas. I'm even gonna drop my opacity down to like 2% because it can get pretty harsh pretty quick. I'm just gonna kind of come in and hit these little shadow areas a little bit more, so we can see how that's working. There's a bit of a shadow line here where I've got some highlight here on the left side of the bottle, and I've got my main light, my key light over here on the right side. So there's almost this little split of an area here where I'm just gonna add a little bit of a line in here just to add to that contrast a bit, to make it feel a little bit more round. So let's see here. So let's turn those two off. Let's turn those back on. I think that looks pretty good. We can come in here a little bit more. We can jazz this up. And I didn't even really do this as much on the other shot that I did. But for the most part, there we go. And actually, I just saw a little bit of my neck up here is looking a little bit of the paper is looking a little off. I'm just gonna kind of come in, grab my patch tool, clean up a little bit of the paper. All right, that's looking a little bit nicer. Let's come in with back in with my dodge, lighten up a couple of these little dark spots on the lemons. They're looking a little sad. And then lastly, I'm just gonna come in, do one last kind of curves adjustment on the whole thing, brighten it up. So that's it for the most part. And if you look at the final image, I did add a bit more of the spices. That was a little bit more time consuming. I also shifted the color of the background a little bit, which involved some masking. And there was an alternate shot where I changed the color of the background entirely to a whole other hue. I'll make another video on that later on in the future and show you guys how to properly change a background color where even things in your foreground are reflecting the color properly. I've got a lot of metal that's reflecting the background in this, so stick around. Be sure to subscribe if you want to catch that video coming up in the future. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for sticking through with it, and I will see you guys on the next one.